The March 9th, 2026 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. We'll have the councilors introduce themselves, starting with Councilor Geary.
Good evening, Belinda Gary, City Councilor at Large.
Good evening, Tim Cowan, City Councilor for Ward 2.
Good evening, Matthew Duval, City Council, Ward 3.
Good evening, Jeff Harmon, Mayor.
Good evening, Kelly Butler, City Council for Ward 4.
Good evening, City Councilor Leroy Walker, Ward 5.
Good evening, Adam Platt, City Councilor at Large.
Good evening, Rachel Randall, City Councilor, Ward 1.
Phil Kroll, City Manager.
Kelsey Earl, Finance Director.
Dennis Dote, Assistant City Manager.
Thank you very much, everyone. For the public, the workshop tonight will be focused on the FY27 budget. At the conclusion of the workshop, the council does have an executive session item to take up. There will be no council action following the executive session, and we intend to adjourn at the conclusion of the executive session. So the first item for the workshop tonight is the Norway Savings Bank Arena and the Ingersoll Turf Facility. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. With me is Mark Gosselin. He's the Executive Director of Sports Tourism, who manages the Norway Savings Bank Arena as well as the Ingersoll Turf Facility. Both of these entities are what we call an enterprise account. So when you're working through your budget, you won't find these two departments in your budget because they are enterprise accounts. We set that up separately. I could let Kelsey go on and explain why the auditors require that. And if you want more information, she can do that. But what we do like to do is bring forward their budget through the budget process so you know what's taking place at these two entities, what we're anticipating for the upcoming year, and questions that you might have. So one thing that the team was working on this information, we wanted to make sure you had access to as much of the documents before tonight's meeting as possible, so you could be familiar with some of these numbers, so you could take a look at where we're focused. There's a few things that Mark will get into as it pertains to Norway that might not be included in the budget regarding revenue, because there's sometimes where there's an entity that might be renting or we're in an agreement with that's not multi-year, it's year to year, but sometimes those contracts, they come when they come, and they might be midstream. And if they're midstream, we're not sure where it's going to go moving forward, but we want to make sure that we know what some of the costs are, we work those into the budget. So, and Mark can get into those. So, Mark, why don't you just give us a really quick highlight of where we are with these two accounts and some of the work that's done?
Sure. Pleasure to be in front of you guys. I don't get to do it all that often, so it's nice to see all your faces. So thank you very much, Council Mayor. I'll start with Norway Savings Bank Arena, and I'll actually jump into those that are not necessarily on the budget sheet as it relates to the revenue side. If we're not 100% sure of whether that's going to get renewed, we don't. From a conservative standpoint, we're not going to necessarily put it in the budget. And there's two things right now that are kind of outstanding. One is our gym rental agreement. I actually just met with them today, and that's looking very positive to move forward, which would be an extra $12,000 added to that $52,000. That would be another year lease for our gym space that's up above in the mezzanine. The other outstanding, of course, is the junior hockey team and the junior hockey program that plays out of the Norway Savings Bank Arena. The junior hockey space is very convoluted right now. They're trying to figure things out as it relates to all the different levels ever since the NIL agreements. And honestly, it's affecting everything from the little kids all the way up to major junior hockey. So right now, the Maine Nordiques were tenants of ours this past year. We are going to be, we're right now in the midst of negotiations for them for next year. So that's the one outstanding piece there that is not seen on the revenue side. But the gym space, like I said, had a great meeting today with that group. they're looking to renew for another year moving forward. So I'm going to be getting that paperwork to them soon. The purple highlighted space on the budget is those are increases in our revenue that we're expecting for this year, just because we've increased our ice rate. Even though we increased our ice rate, we're still actually very affordable across the state. Some of the ice rentals run from $280 an hour to $300 an hour. And right now we are still just a little bit below that, which is, from an accessibility standpoint, allows us to stay very active, but also allows those people that might come from other areas that look at us to come and travel to our area and use our facility simply because of our costs. So the purple, that's what you saw in the revenue. From an expense side, the increases that you see are mainly our cleaning services. We do have a small increase in our cleaning services because of the use of the facility and how active it is. It is a constant battle to try to keep that place as clean as possible. Everything from emptying the trash cans to cleaning the windows to cleaning the locker rooms. So we actually have an outsourced individual that comes in 3 times a week in the morning, deep clean, get ready for the evening, and then our staff piggybacks on that. So it's not like our staff doesn't do any cleaning. It is, he comes in, does the deep cleaning in the morning, and then our staff is able to do facility functions in the morning, and then in the evening our staff picks up where he leaves off. Solid waste disposal, you're going to see a big increase there simply because this past year we found out that we were only paying for our dumpster. We weren't paying for the weight that was being removed from the dumpster. That was coming out of another budget. We're not sure whether that was our maintenance budget or from our public works budget. We're not sure, but that got put on us this year. So that's why you're seeing that big increase, just because that $600 was actually just paying for the rental fee of the dumpster. So now we're paying for that tonnage to that waste disposal. And then the other increases that you're seeing are just the increases that was provided to me as it relates to natural gas, electricity, bottled gas, and our insurance premiums. And I will say, actually, our partner, United Insurance, did a great job in helping us trying not to increase that, because insurance premiums right now for ice rinks are very, very difficult. And they're actually a lot higher than that. So he did, I believe he did, and his team did a great job in helping us, so that made sure that wasn't such a substantial increase.
Can you scroll back up the revenue
Sure.
for a minute? So one thing that especially for new counselors coming in, just as a snapshot of history. So different business. So when the arena was built, it was really built for youth hockey in our community. And so you can see where our priority, when you look at the revenue that comes in, is really Gladiators are our number one tenant, because that was by design when it was built. It was built to make sure that we are providing space for our youth programs for hockey. That hasn't changed in the 11, 12 years since being operating. That focus is still on youth hockey. What Mark does a great job of is filling those other gaps throughout a day, because most of our youth hockey programs were on weekend, right? They get prime time. It's evenings and weekends. So we work as a team on identifying how do we fill those other gaps within the day with other programming. So sometimes it's the adult programs, sometimes it's the learn to skate, sometimes it's especially with Nordiques or prior to that, our other tenant being there using that facility during the day for rentals. And then also we try to keep a good balance with, there's benefit in bringing non-ice initiatives, events to the arena. And it's a good space for that, and we've had great success in that. Mark really works through those relationships to ensure that's another stream of revenue that's coming in. And but the focus is always making sure that we are available for youth hockey, because that was the intent when it was built.
And then also to piggyback on that is also the high school hockey piece with Everett Little, Poland Levitt, Oak Hill, Gray New Gloucester, our the Red Hornets this year had a great hockey season on the female side. Unfortunately, we fell a little short. We hosted the high school girls state championships this year. But to the non-event side, we really try to focus on a couple months because the rest of it is really hockey. It's really hockey based. It's camps, it's clinics. Talking to Central Maine Community College right now about doing a summer camp, overnight summer camp for the first time at the arena, where they would house the kids at Central Maine Community College and then they would come skate during the day for the camping clinic at the arena. The roller hockey, the National Collegiate Roller Hockey, which we hosted a couple years ago, which was a great big success. We're looking at possibly bringing them back in 2028. So we're always looking forward in the calendar. It's not just about what's going on now, but it's some of these bids, we need some leeway. We're submitting a bid to host the USA Curling National Championship for 28. Those are all little things that are kind of in the works that again, keeps the building relevant, one, but two, it just brings a different element to the arena. And we're very fortunate. We get a great staff. I mean, we have a great GM who takes so much pride. Robbie Burby does such a fantastic job at the arena. He makes us all look very good in regards to his knowledge in facility maintenance, facility repair, machine repair. Our part-time staff is just as wonderful. So we're very fortunate on that side of things as well. Let me jump into Ingersoll. Ingersoll Turf Facility used to be our ice rink. Used to be a very cold ice rink, right, Leroy? Very cold ice rink. It was something that we repurposed when we built the Norway Savings Bank Arena. We felt that the community needed and wanted and was asking for an indoor turf facility. And there was a lot of them, not a lot of them, there was a number of them across the state, but they were all spread out. One of our feasibility studies that we did for sports, recreation, and tourism shows us that about 74% of the state's population is only an hour drive from Auburn. So it allows us to not only just get Auburn residents and local residents to use the turf facility, but we're also getting people as far as, we've had Presque Isle, we've had Rockport, we've had people come from Kennebunk, York, just to use the facility. And then just like Norway, we try to and do our best to focus on those core community groups, right? And then we backfill that with anything extra in regards to outside rentals. So we've got some great groups that rent from us, everything from baseball groups to Central Maine Community College softball and baseball is in there right now getting ready for their season. And what's nice about a turf facility, our batting cages do very, very well. If we had more of them, that line, you would see more money in that line if we had some more batting cages. And our rental income has always stayed pretty consistent. And just like the arena, now we're starting to backfill those spots that are empty. Our part-time salaries line did go up a little bit. But there's other areas where we found that our general professional line, we were able to save some money there and eliminate just a little bit there to help offset, as well as some of our program expenses. We found that we were able to take a look at the budget line sheet and able to get a couple thousand out of that as well to help offset that budget a little bit on the expense side. But what's nice, you're going to see in the capital request, you'll see a capital request for new turf. That turf has been in there since day one, and we're starting to see some major tears. We're starting to see some major things that could be major issues. And if that turf goes, then everything that we see here goes with it, right? Because that's our core product with that facility.
Yeah, so we won't get into capital tonight. That's okay, but we'll stay focused on operating. But this gives you a good overview. I think one thing that we made a change maybe 2 years ago, just aligning management of the Ingersoll in with the management of Norway. This is what they do. It's very similar. It's rentals. But it's also building relationships with users and sponsors. So there's times when Mark has a little bit more to offer a sponsor, he can say, hey, not only can I put your ad up at the at Norway Savings Bank, but let's work on an agreement that we can include Ingersoll. Ingersoll is getting this many people in annually. This is what we're seeing. And so he's able to kind of expand on what he's able to offer as we work on sponsorships. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And, you know, Rob Burby goes out to NARS every year for professional training. And he always sits in a sponsorships / marketing class, and people are just like, oh, we had a good year. We had 50,000 in sponsorships. Oh, we had a good year. We had 40,000 in sponsorships. And then Robbie goes, oh, we had a good year. We had $200,000 in corporate sponsorships. And a lot of that is because we have multiple facilities that we can position to, a business like Ruper's, Jesse St. Laurent, a great partner of ours. Other partners that I meet with, I always bring up the conversation of like, hey, don't forget, we also have the Ingersoll turf facility, but we also have the softball fields as well that we're also looking to support. So I'm also helping Heath Crocker and the recreation department with some of the recreational signage as well. So it's nice when you have a campus like this and you're able to position those types of things, you're able to talk about multiple touch points, multiple families, multiple sports, and it's very valuable.
And the last thing I think we'll cover just that, if you take a look at our sponsors, most of those sponsors have been with us since the beginning. And so Mark just works on renewals with them, talks about other opportunities for them. But there was a large business support in building this arena, and they committed to it, and they're continuing to commit to it.
Yep, since day
through
one.
their sponsorships. So yeah, that's, again, enterprise accounts, you won't see this in the budget, but we want to make sure that you're aware of these as we move forward, so you know, because you'll be asked, or somebody will ask a question when we look at the overall budget. Well, where's Norway? Well, this is why I'm having this up first.
Questions from the council? Council Cowan?
Thanks, Mark. You mentioned the batting cages. If you had more, you could have more income. Is there space for more?
No.
Okay.
That's why.
Bummer.
I wish we did. I wish we had more space, but it would creep into the soccer field. And at that point, we're dealing with a hockey rink size surface, right? That we repurposed into a soccer field. So if we basically use the extra space outside of the hockey surface to put the 2 batting cages in.
Other questions from the council? Council Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. I don't know if I'm not seeing it because my eyes are not clear here or what, but are people that come in and have for years bought signs, the Norway Savings Bank, the money that they give you, I'm not seeing that pocket. Am I missing it?
I think it creeped on to the second page.
It's a sponsorship?
Yes.
Sponsorship, 200,000?
Yes.
Is that just signs? Is that a mixture of everything?
No, that's just signs. I don't include the in-kind services that we also get. We also work with some partners who help provide budget relieving items such as pest control services. We do an in-kind trade where that company gets a sign. We don't get paid. We don't get charged for our pest control services. So that's not because it's not cash related. I don't include that within the budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Platt?
Thanks, Mark. I've got 2 questions. The first one might be for Kelsey and might be maybe something you can look into and we can discuss I know we're going to discuss this all at the end, but I'm curious where the Norway Arena and Ingersoll have fallen in years past. If they say they're going to make $50,000 in last year's budget, where did they fall? If they said they were going to lose 25 the year before, where did they fall? How accurate have we been historically? And then my second question is for you, Mark. I look at the increased expenses. We could all guess electricity, natural gas. Your HVAC systems are only going to get more expensive over time. What are your plans for the next 1 to 5 years to combat that? So you're always coming back to us with a solvent budget. You talked a little bit about filling holes, opportunities for revenue growth there. How about sponsorship, efficiencies with electricity? What types of things are more long-term?
Right. It's a great question. And it's also why we haven't been overly aggressive with increasing our ice rate. So that increasing of the ice rate has allowed us to see where we needed to stay flat, right, in some years, because we saw positive, forecasting positive, right? And then when we see a challenging year coming up with utilities, coming up with different things, we're able to communicate ahead of time with all of our users and say, hey, we're going to go up $5. We've never increased rate by more than $5 to our current user groups. So that's one thing that we're going to be constantly watching in regards to helping us in the future years, because right now we're still under rate compared to the state, right? And then other things is the event side of things where we could increase between the months of April, May, and June. Right now we have 4 events. The whole idea is also to increase some usage around those events that are not going to cost us money. I've looked into concerts. Concerts are not cheap. Then they're not cheap to run. So you finding the right events that could possibly help us push past 55,000. So we're constantly looking at those types of things. Recently had a good conversation with the promoter who does Eric's Church and down in Hampton Ballroom Casino. And that group handles a lot of smaller acts, which are which are more affordable for us. So those are the things we're constantly trying to figure out, is how can we increase that non-event line to help that, because you're right, utilities are not gonna go down.
They're not going away. And I guess my only follow-up, a little bit of a loaded question in that my thought was revolving around, ice fees. And
Yep.
I guess just from my perspective here, I just want to say that I think what we've seen in a lot of different, either enterprise accounts or just different organizations within the city, emotionally, nobody wants to raise fees, and I don't want to raise fees. But I do think as part of a solvent long-term plan, it is important to understand that you have to.
Right.
And that over time, it's better to do it a little bit over time than to wait 10 years and then double
Correct.
it. It gets organizations into trouble. We're going to be talking about, several organizations like that in the budget process. So you guys are the pros at this, but as I was thinking about increased utilities moving forward, I'm thinking, I think being as diligent as we can and as fair as we can in the increase in fees, I think that's like the safest way to buffer a budget. But
So Adam, just to let you know, we started at 235 back when we first opened the doors. We're now at 260.
I think to build on that, the other piece is, so we use some what's called Placer software, right? That's how we're able to provide for you a lot of the reports when we have an event. Well, there's benefit to that for Norway as well. When we're using that space, Mark's able to take that data and be able to share that with sponsors, because we've got to make sure that we're always demonstrating there's an economic value for you to buy this sign space or whatever it is that he's working through with a sponsor. Why is there an investment there that's going to have a return for you? Well, Mark's able to take a lot of that data and be able to put together a great slide deck for most of the sponsors and say, look, where you're located, and he's got a whole map that he does for the arena, where you're located, this is how many views you're having, this is how many people we have coming in. And then for the region, what we try to make sure that we're also doing when we go and speak to a sponsor is that there's an economic return to your business that's in this proximity. And Mark rattles off numbers pretty easily as far as the distance from where we are to how many people we reach, and kind of works that through. But that economic benefit, we have to be able to demonstrate that as well. But one thing that we do with those who are renting, what's that benefit for that rate that you're paying? And to remember that timing for when you're renting comes at a premium as well. And so we do work that through. So, your price, and off season, or we do think about those things as we're negotiating some of the agreements to make sure that it's meeting their need, but it's meeting ours. But I agree with you. We cannot be in a business where we wait 4 years and then say, oh, now we're going to raise your rate 3 times of where we had it. because these are parents that are paying for programming, and that's where that money's coming through. And so those small increments, staying on track, making sure we're passing down some of those costs are really important. But they cannot cover the whole cost, so that's why we look at some of the non-ICE events to help control some of that for our youth programs.
You're welcome.
Other questions from the council? So, Council Walker.
Yeah, my question is with the solid waste, you were saying that we paid $600 for the dumpster.
Correct.
And you're saying now we're gonna go to $12,000 to get rid of the
That is correct.
waste that we have. And you're saying you don't know where that money paid for it, how it paid for it?
He might not. We can tell you. So,
Well, that's
just gets
my
bills.
question. I'd like to know how we paid the $12,000.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's right within our solid waste line item. And so as we started working towards really the facilities component of what we've started taking over, as far as schools, as far as all the entities, we've started breaking down those bills so that we're covering, those entities are covering those costs. It's really important for an enterprise account for operating costs to cover all costs associated with that enterprise. So that's why that has been, because that's an operating cost, separate from what we do sometimes with personnel, because personnel's, we look at that a little differently, other than their costs of actually being on site. When it comes to operating costs, like maintenance costs, we make sure now that we're pulling that out. But I don't know, Kelsey, if you have any more.
So there's $11,400 less in our city solid waste line item that's been moved to Mark's budget. Is that what?
Mark's budget.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions from the council? So one item that comes up every year regarding Norway Savings Bank is regarding the debt service. So I just wanted to cover this and make a few comments about it because I'm sure council is going to hear this question. So you'll notice in the financials that Mark provided that they have an operating profit every year. That operating profit gets transferred over to help offset the debt service. So the debt service for the arena, we're going to get to this here in a minute, is on the debt schedule, and around 20% of that or so every year, round numbers, is being paid for by the operating profit from the arena. So, you know, a lot of times I'm asked, well, why is that on the city side? Look, that was a decision that was made a long time ago. I think that the best way to look at this is that it's an economic development investment. So I'll just give you a couple quick examples of the impacts you get. So, you know, I like to drive around and see what's going on, so I stop in the arena. I was in there once earlier this year. There was a hockey tournament going on. Everybody was from out of state. Everybody participating in the tournament was from out of state. They're all staying in local hotels. They're here for several days. A couple weeks ago, I was in a local restaurant, couldn't get a seat, had to wait a few minutes. There's at least 50 kids with coaches and parents in there. I happened to stop into the same place again yesterday, and the owner says to me, our week was made again, same thing last night. So there's some real benefits outside of the recreational activities that go on at the arena for a lot of the local businesses in the area. So you're likely to get this question. That's how I've answered it in the past. And, you know, I think it's a really great benefit to the community, even though we're in effect helping subsidize the debt service. Councilor Walker?
Mr. Mayor, I'm glad that you brought that up, because when we were trying to build this arena, that was the way we were selling it. And there were so many people on the left side and so many on the right side. It took us months to convince the people sitting out there that this was something we needed to look at. We needed to bring people to our city and to show them that we have something that is probably one of the best at the time, and it was worthwhile. It was going to pay for it in a different way, not just selling the ice time, but bringing people to make sure they use everything we have in our city. and I'm glad you see that.
Thank you. Anything else on this item? Thank you very much. We
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
time.
We'll move on now to the debt service schedule.
All right, I'm gonna have Kelsey go up. She'll walk through the sheet with you. I think that, yeah, I have paper copies if you don't have your digital with you and you need a paper copy. So while Kelsey gets started, I'll come and hand you those.
You know, you can, it's kind of tiny on that screen there, so. What we did was, since we're speaking of city side only, that's all you're seeing on this debt schedule is city debt. We can get further into city and school combined and things like that later if you so choose. But right now, this is city side only, and this is showing everything on our books. So you'll notice that the grand total principal and interest does not match what's in our debt service, and you'll see a little note on the right-hand side that says without ARRA, and that debt total matches our total debt service in the budget. The reason for that is because we have on the far left that 2009 ARRA, which is a sewer district bond. It was taken on behalf of the sewer district at that time. They pay that. So it's city debt, but the sewer department actually pays that. So we do not include that in our debt service total when we're adding up our budgeted amounts. You'll also see a highlighted section that's highlighted because that's very specifically an estimate for the upcoming debt service year. No principal is included because the principal doesn't come until the next budget year. But that total principal and interest, as we've stated when discussing the budget, does include the estimate for the interest of that general obligation bond. If you look on the bottom section of that highlighted, it says 621,588.89. That total is included in our debt service total right now as an estimate for our capital coming up, which I know we'll talk capital later, but I just wanted to note that that is in there and show you where that's included. Is there anything specific anyone would like me to go over? We've seen this, you've seen this schedule last year, although like I said, it was combined with school, and this is city only that you're seeing right now.
Council Platt?
Could you walk me through the public safety building?
Yes.
I'm just seeing 32.5 million in principal for that bonded amount. Am I?
That's correct.
Well, go back to 2024.
And you'll see the 5.85. So you'll see 2024 go bond twice. That second one says 5.85 PSF. That's 5.85 for public safety facility that was drawn down.
And
I
that
see
was
13
that
plus
was the
32 is 45. I see it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's separated out because there were some initial charges, architectural work, design.
Correct. There were
engineering.
initial design and permitting costs that needed to be paid for at that time. I know it's a lot of information, so.
And just to confirm again, as I look all the way to the right, the decrease in payments assumes a future in which we pass no additional CIP, and that's what the retirement of debt would look like and how it would affect payment.
Yes, so that difference between the total above it and the total underneath, that difference is what's, so the whole total gets retired, but that difference is your debt total reduction amount.
Right, I think that's really important for the council to look at. You know, this is an item that Councilor Platts and I have talked about for the last couple of years, which is there had been a lot of deferral in the past for capital items. Lots of those things have gotten to a point where they had to be done. So what falls off your retirement and debt service each year in the next few years is very little. It makes it very challenging because there's still going to be ongoing capital needs for equipment, paving roads, whatever, that the council need to think about. And as we get further into the budget, we'll see that probably the principal driver for the pressure on the budget this year is debt service.
And you'll notice with our debt service, we generally stick with the principle of a 10-year term with our general obligation bonds, unless it's a major infrastructure project such as the public safety facility. You'll see that debt service goes for a 20-year term. Not for the 5.85, it actually worked in our favor to go with the 10-year term for that amount, but the larger amount is with a 20-year term.
Other questions or comments from the council on the debt service schedule? Council Cowan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to add, in addition to, you know, some projects besides the public safety facility that kind of needed to be taken care of because we had to wait, we waited as long as we could. I think there's also the reality that the costs of some of these major capital purchases has gone up tremendously in the last few years, and so I think that's also something that we have to factor in is we have regular things we have to purchase, but those items are more expensive in the last few years than they had been 5-10 years ago. So,
Yeah, great point. I think that you do see that added cost. You know, cost of an HVAC system is certainly a lot higher than where we were, you know, back in 2007 even, when we were replacing some of these. And then the other piece, as you said, Councilor Cowan, I think you're seeing some, at least in the last 3 bond years, you're seeing the Engine 2 facility. We broke that up over, I think, 4 years. And then you see Merrill Road, you see the Powell Center, that share with the Powell Center. That was about a third of the total project is what you see in the bond. So you're right, you are seeing that. I think the piece to kind of pull out, because I know we'll be talking a lot about the public safety building impact, right? So if you take that 2004 bond and you take the 2006 bond that was pulled on that public safety, you take a look at the principal on both of those line items and you take a look at the interest. We're sitting at about total payout. We know what the total payout is now, right? But we've gone out to bond on that. We still might need a gap bond for once all the pricing gets done. But for the majority of this, we know what the cost is. And we're coming in at about $66 million for that total project. If you look at the bond documents that were done when we went out to bond, and Kelsey can bring that up, but we were projecting a lot higher than where we are. We were able to make some good financial decisions on the bonding. We wanted to make sure we're very conservative when we put it out because you're estimating what you're going to be for interest rates. You're estimating what kind of return we could get on a bond ratings as well as the sale of those. But you're seeing a substantial less of an impact. Now, this is a big number. $66 million obviously is a big number. But know that it's a lot less than what we communicated to the public for that total project because of some of the financing structuring that we did. And we'll get you that, but I'll make sure that you have that. I was just looking for it just now, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But I know we're at least $10 million less than what was shared when we went out to bond. Probably more than that.
Other questions? No? So we'll move on to solid waste.
So I thought this would be good to pull out from our discussions because it's such an impact that we currently have when it comes to solid waste. Because there's a couple moving pieces with this, right? It's not just our increase on what our tipping fee will be in FY27, but it's also the impact of, or the changes, I should say, with our contract for solid waste collection. And so that was a major lift last year on getting a contract, going out to bid, ensuring that we had all the items that we wanted as a city, as we look to expand our recycling opportunities, as we wanted organic waste worked into the contract. So there's a lot of moving pieces that came with the contract. And then there was also a demand on the provider for automation. And so we were not going to, and we tried to go with a different vendor, but we were not going to be able to avoid this. This was coming due to the labor costs, inefficiencies with our current collection process. So we knew that we were going to be seeing this. We weren't sure exactly what year. Even just prior to this budget, we weren't sure whether or not the trucks would be delivered to Pine Tree, Casella. We weren't sure if they would have those, if we were going to be looking at this timeline. But all their equipment's in place, and so they are on track. So that's why the bin purchase. And so I did break that out a little differently than what you would see in this solid waste line item, just so that you can get a good handle on the overall changes. So we're looking at about just over $500,000 increase in this line item. That's broken out with our disposal increase, going from the 516,000 last year to 812,000. Basically, that's take our tonnage that we bring in, multiply that out by going from $54 a ton to $88 a ton. That's our change. And so that increase was factored in. And then our solid waste collection, because we're changing and we're going to automation, there was a decrease in our contract for what Casella would be charging for us to collect our waste. So we're experiencing that decrease of about 131,000, but you can see where there is an upfront cost, and we'll see this over the next 4 years of this agreement, and that's the bin purchase. And so the bins will be two bins per resident that we're currently looking at. We'll need to dig into this a little more because that's what's factored into this cost. But then, how we work this is going to be really important. I think I had mentioned the size of the bins, the size that I gave you at the last meeting of around 90 gallons. That was for some of our more municipal facilities. It's actually residents at 64 gallons per size. So, which will be a lot easier for residents to be able to manage. However, that's going to really require a lot of residents to say, I need to make sure I'm shifting some of my waste into the recycle bin. That's recyclable materials, so that I'm not filling up my solid waste bin that I have, because it's one bin per household. And so we'll need to work through that. Other communities have. We're not blazing a trail here. There's other communities that have worked through this and they figured out how that's going to work. That's not to say we're going to have a lot of education challenges and a lot of people participating in the way that we need them to participate, as far as where they place their bins, what they put in those bins. All that will need to come about, because we're changing a lot of habits here over years of what I do with my leaves. Before, it was just bag your leaves up and put them on the side of the road. That's not there anymore. There's no one coming by picking trash up on the side of the road, bags, and throwing them into the hopper. It's bins. That's where we're operating. Doesn't mean that we don't look and say, okay, where do we provide some leaf drop-offs in the future, and do we provide that like we do now with brush, and how do we incorporate that so that way their residents still have access. Moving down is the recycling disposal. We're still staying about the same amount. It's going to be hard to target this. If we start seeing people shift their usage of recycling, then that's gonna move that needle up. And right now, it's costing us more to recycle materials than it does for us to take it to Maine Waste to Energy. So that could shift those numbers based on. We'll start tracking it. We'll start looking at what people's use is, but that's been pretty consistent, that number for us. And then the collection, because we're going and we're collecting every week on recycling, there's the change that you see with the $167,000 increase. And then the organic waste, even though the header on this line item, that's changed right now. It's just looking at the 19,000. This is the line item that we were using also. It was basically miscellaneous waste in the past. And so that included the spring cleanup disposal costs. If you recall, we ended that last June, and there's no, that's not in this budget, and so as we developed this budget, we did not include any spring cleanup in this budget for your consideration. But a little more detail for you, so you get a little more breakdown of exactly where that line item is impacting us, but certainly Dennis worked on negotiating this contract and working through this with Casella, so between the two of us, we can answer any questions that you might have.
Questions by the council? Council Butler?
If we consider the education component, are there anticipated costs to misplaced items through that process? So if something ends up where it shouldn't be?
Oh, yeah, you want to cover that, Dennis?
Do you mean just if they were to put something in their trash or in the recycling containment? What happens? Yeah, so there is some penalties. I wouldn't say there's an increased cost. There's increased enforcement in that regard. So if somebody is putting, let's say, non-recyclable materials in their recycling bin, it's actually pretty neat. These automated trucks have a camera, so they actually see as the waste is going into the truck and it's dumping in, and that's how they identify if there is any contaminated waste. The home would be tagged, so to speak, reported that there's an issue. They would be notified that they can't be doing whatever they're doing. Then I suppose if they continue, then there could be fines and those kinds of things. But ultimately, they would have an opportunity to be an education component. Part of the package from Casella is putting a truck or some folks in front of the solid waste truck. So especially on the implementation of this from an education standpoint, that's all baked into this, their fees. That essentially is the education bonus. So they'll be going ahead if the bins aren't placed correctly, if they're not, that's going to cause a problem for the truck. They're going to make the adjustments and then notify the resident. Hey, you put your bins out there. They would not have been collected normally, maybe the way you had it. So the education component is that. Am I answering your question on that?
You are. I have one other question. If I happen to be someone who has bins at home and I have extra and those are put out, how will those be managed?
They will be left there. So the only bins that will be collected would be the bins that are issued. The two 64-gallon bins that will be issued are the only bins that they can collect. Speaking to what Manager Kroll was talking about was leaf collection. So somebody could, if you can fit a bag of leaves in your bin along with your other trash, you'll be okay. But traditionally, people like to put their bags out and just kind of line them there. Those will not be collected going forward. We will have a drop site location for things like that. Same place Phil alluded to, our brush goes. They actually take leaves the same way. So we'll be able to do some things like that, but has to be in the bin for that to be collected.
Thank you.
Council Walker?
Thank you. I'm going to guess that numbers are going to come to us of how many people are going to get buckets and all of that, because you've got an awful lot of increased numbers here. I would hope that not half the city's going to be left out and be picked up in the back of a compactor, for instance.
Yeah, everyone will be getting those, those bins, and there may be a period in the rollout where some of the city is getting the automated service and some of the city is still on the traditional, just as the rollout may not be all at once, but I expect that once it's complete, everyone has those bins issued to them.
Council Platt?
I guess my second question would be, the increase that I'm seeing with the solid waste, and I understand the 54 to the 88, but I would like to see a breakdown of exactly what that 88 is going to do for the waste to energy, so that we understand why we're taking such a drastic increase and getting rid of our trash out there.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I know the manager has been working with Maine Waste to Energy. The 54 to 88 is the member community. There's going to be other tipping fee increases for non-member communities and commercial, and I think that's a good question, Council Walker, that we could follow up on is, what's the size of the challenge, financial challenge at Maine Waste to Energy, and how are fees being raised, tipping fees being raised to cover that across the whole user community?
Yeah, I think I can schedule something in the future with a Maine Waste to Energy update. There's a few things that are still being worked out. I think obviously the initial change for member fee was the 54 to 88, and then the other source is the commercial fee, and that has moved to 133 a ton. And there was a member commercial rate, and as we looked into that, there really was no obligation to have a member commercial rate, and so we now just have one gate rate. So if somebody's coming in, it's a commercial rate, it's $133 per ton, and so that's consistent across the board. And so it won't be if you're a commercial business in Auburn, you're not getting a different price than if you're a commercial business for Lewiston. It's all consistent.
The manager will get us some additional information on this, but I think fundamentally the idea here is to avoid what we just had to do a week ago now, when Maine Waste to Energy has an operating deficit and the member communities have to, in effect, bail them out, right? So our understanding in Auburn when we did that with the board was that that would not be recurring, and they would take actions that would balance out their financials in the FY27 budget, which is driving a lot of this increase. Councilor Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just for further understanding, so I see the budget, I understand the contracts that we signed. None of this is a surprise to me, so it all looks good. Just for my further understanding, really the only, or maybe Mr. Mayor, you want to answer this, the only power we have over these numbers is to encourage people to create less waste, to encourage people to get their organic waste into that collection stream and out of Maine Energy to Waste. Other than that, there's not much we can do. We've committed to weekly pickups. We've committed to solid waste and recycling. I guess I'm really saying nothing other than that after this budget cycle, I think there's probably some discussions to be had about, how might we as a city encourage people to create less waste. I personally have a lot of issues with this notion that as humans we're allowed to consume as much as we want, and it's up to our municipalities to pay for that waste removal. That doesn't have bearing on the budget discussion, but that's my takeaway from looking at these numbers. So
Yeah, so I think fundamentally that's correct. We have a contracted price here. I think that there's some things that are important to understand about how we got here. So I've had people raise questions about, well, we don't have weekly recycling now. Let's just cut the budget and only have it twice a month. Well, the issue here is that the equipment that's being used are split trucks, and they're going to be doing recycling and they're going to be doing waste, and you're not going to save any money by switching your recycling rate, the schedule. The other thing is the follow-up people have said, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing now. Well, I'm not sure we could find a vendor that would keep doing what we're doing now with having manual pickup, and even if we did, the disposal rate would be a lot higher because the significant increase in labor to try to do this the way they've been doing it now. So I think you're right, Councilor Platts. The primary way people could reduce this is by reducing the amount of waste that they produce.
The only thing I would add to it, which you might see as we move forward, as we roll out new programming, it always uncovers stuff, right? I think there's, as we look at our list, as we look at who's using the service currently, I think the team's already working on, as a commercial business, that's also a home, but getting curbside. So we'll work through those as we find them. But policy-wise, what you might see come back to you as a recommendation regarding policy, if we see that, we'll look at how many multi-unit homes we're looking at. What's that number that should be part of the regular household waste, and then what really is that tipping point that's probably more commercial. And so if there's, we're going to assess that. We're going to look at the numbers, how many we have, and then you might see a policy decision that comes back that might shift some of that out from what our costs are. And so, but those are policy decisions that we'll bring back to you. But you're right, for the most part, what you're seeing right here, fixed cost.
Yeah, I see garbage creation analogous to energy cost. It's just getting worse and worse, and I think we're gonna be having discussions we've never had to have about the generation of refuse. So.
Councilor Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so make sure I'm correctly thinking, if say multifamily or housing areas, if it went to commercial, it'd be larger bins, for example, or?
It would be on their own. Currently, I believe that
Gotcha.
it's 3 units. 3 units are considered part of our costs, what we collect. If it's greater than 3 units, well, I'm sorry, they do have to pay for that difference, but we allow them to be part of our collection at a fee. But what we're saying is, okay, should that continue, or is there a number that makes more sense that's just commercial, and we probably, especially as we look to roll this out, we're looking at where are these bins going, how are we applying them on the street, is there, that's going to be part of our decision making as we move forward. But we need to give some runway to this for those who own these buildings.
And just one quick follow-up. Sorry if I missed this, but the bin purchase, there's going to be some additional yearly cost, but will it be lower than this, or is?
This is your number for 4 years.
Okay.
And then it's bin management after that.
Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I think my last question is, are we going to keep some of the recycling bins that you have up near Public Works?
I think so. I think that makes good sense. We've got it worked into the agreement. Dennis, you got more to add to that?
I just think, yes. I mean, at this point, they intend to stay there. I think it's a part of our data analysis and checking on that as we go. What do we see? Does that, with weekly recycling, does that start to really drop off in terms of the uses at these drop sites? If we see the equal, we'll just have, those will be some decisions we'll make as we understand what the usage is and the data tells us.
We've also looked at, do we move a bin over to 67 Kitty Hawk? That would be in a gated area. It would only be when it's operating, but that might help with that end of the community to be able to have access to recycling as well, so they're not driving all the way to Grace Lawn, or maybe they just don't even take advantage of that. So we have some opportunities there once we start assessing how much are we actually bringing in once we roll out the automation.
I like that opportunity, but I got one suggestion. I don't know if you probably thought about it, I'm sure, with all that we've gone through. I believe cardboard is probably one of the only things that's given any payback at all. I was thinking that maybe you could look at having one of them types of dumpsters, because we really need to get that out of the regular waste stream. That takes up way too much room. And in holidays, it's just crazy. We know how people are shipped everything. We need to, I think, have something on maybe 2 different parts of Auburn that they could crush that cardboard and we can send it out and make a couple bucks on it. I know you have to invest to do that, but it's a thought.
Well, our investment would be to build on our relationship with our provider to say there could be a cost benefit to you on providing us a bin, a dumpster that is only a compactor for cardboard. So you're not having, because we do single sort, this is where they bring it, they sort it all out. So you're not getting that contamination, but you're also eliminating a lot of labor when it comes to that. So I think that's where we leverage our relationship, and we leverage a cost benefit to our partner, and try to see if we can make something like that occur.
Councilor Duval.
Yeah, just it's another weedy question, but as as this transition happens, I think initially a lot, but even then going on, people will still be able to bring their excess household waste to MWAC. So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine people are going to not put out the wrong bin. They're going to have, there's just, yeah, okay, good.
Yep.
Other questions from the council? The last thing I would mention, it's not in the budget this year, but just to remind the council that part of the contract that the staff negotiated includes the vendor having to meet the extended producer responsibility law when that's triggered. It's been passed by the legislature. DEP's in rulemaking, and the way that's going to work is that if we support recycling of the items on the EPR list, the city will receive revenue back from DEP that comes from the EPR fees that they charge manufacturers. So hopefully in the out years, we'll see some additional revenue coming in on the solid waste line here from recycling. Anything else on this item? Not seeing any, we can move on to revenue.
Great. So you have the revenue sheet. I'll break these out into classifications. We'll start with general government. If you take a look at the first 4 categories within that line item, those are reimbursements, direct reimbursements that are factored on a formula. And so our homestead exemption, our personal property reimbursement, tree growth, and veterans, that's all based on a formula. We worked that through. The driver on the homestead, I think this is a good one for us to discuss, is that it's based on what our certified ratio is. The city assessor came in and they gave a presentation, talked about that certified ratio. That certified ratio drops, then the amount that we get back from the state also drops. And so, so we know if it's a full 100%, we know that, guaranteed what our return will be based on that 100% ratio. We know what that looks like based on the state's formula. As that drops, and that's that piece that we work through, and as the mayor, I think, gave a good overview at the last meeting as it pertained to, some of that is determined, all of that rather, is determined after we approve this budget. So we are pretty conservative with the amount that we put in here. We want to make sure that we're hitting it. You can see where we're, for the the actual for FY 24, FY 25 was just around 1.7. There's some built-in changes there. We won't have the actual for FY 26 till after this year, but you can see where we're estimating this pretty closely. Personal property is another one that always has some changing impacts to this. We tend to lose revenue on personal property because of some of the changes that the state worked into the formula. And so, but we try to, the way that we've been able to consistently hold this, we're staying pretty consistent. And then tree growth and veterans, again, veterans will be really driven by who applies for that. But Mayor, you got a question?
Yeah, and before you move on, just so the council's aware, there is very active discussion going on in the legislature regarding some of these exemptions. A lot of this is being done to address the policy issues surrounding the burden that property tax has on people. The issue for a municipality like Auburn is that if the exemptions are increased, the city still has to make up the difference, right, in your budget. So a number of the advocacy groups that represent municipalities aren't opposed to additional veterans or blind or homestead exemptions, but our point has been that if the state wants to increase those, that difference needs to be made up through state revenues. Because if you think about this, if you increase, let's say you increase the homestead exemption to $50,000, we get reimbursement for part of that from the state, But the balance, you've got to make that up through the rest of your taxpayers. So it's really a situation where if the state wants to change these, that's great. They just need to make up the difference through state revenue, so it's not having an adverse impact on other property taxpayers.
We'll continue monitoring that. We do it now. There's, like the mayor said, it's a constant battle, and there's a constant push and pull when it comes to a lot of these. Excise taxes, this is money that we actually collect when we do process boat registrations, vehicle registrations, all of those. So we do collect a fee on the excise taxes. Questions on that, Kelsey can provide more information for you on that. The largest revenue stream that we have within this revenue line item is the state revenue share. And again, this is one where there's constant bills on this as well, on what is that formula, should it change, how does it impact us? These are things that we're monitoring. I think that monitoring the formula, I think there's a bill this week that's regarding the school funding formula. So there's, and those are good changes that are happening within that formula. It's probably been outdated by 10, 15 years now, but we're monitoring these, but we are being as conservative as we can on the state revenue share. What the state revenue office does for us is they provide us a projection. They're economists that are forecasting what are these impacts within the state as far as tourism coming in, as far as how much people are spending within their households. So they're going to give us an estimate based on the formula of where they believe we're at. We usually get one. We got one actually in February. Usually it's March, but we got it a little earlier. We got an estimate, and we look at that as exactly that. It's an estimate. So we have not said, okay, we'll just take that amount and we'll paste it in here, and that's the amount we're going to go to, because Kelsey, one, wouldn't allow me, and she would give you a lot of reasons why there's a lot of variables that go with that, and we shouldn't do that. We're landing currently at 7.7. It's about $1 million less than where the state's at, but in their projection. But we think this is. You can see where in FY25 we did collect 8.3. But again, there's so many moving pieces with this as far as what's happening in the economy.
I think it's important for the council to understand how this is calculated, right? So when you think of revenue sharing, we have the school aid. School aid there's a formula, but it's an appropriated amount. The state has appropriated the funds to pay that. General revenue sharing, the Revenue Forecasting Committee is looking at a crystal ball and saying, this is what we think the economy is going to look like over the next year. This is calculated monthly. The estimate is just their estimate by applying the formula with the factors that pertain to Auburn, and saying this is how much revenue sharing we think that you will realize over the course of the year. It could be more, it could be less. It's calculated every month. They send you the check every month, and you get what you get. So the council's been quite careful on this before, because it's really difficult, as we've seen just in the last couple of weeks. The economy can have some significant changes quite rapidly.
And then the only other one that I think I would highlight under general government would be the last item, which is the fund balance contribution. We've kept that the same. We're keeping it the same here. At some point, does it make sense to reduce that? It certainly does. I think that we want to make sure that we look to reduce that. You'll see actual revenue is zeroed out. I think that's just probably a timing. Is that what we said on that? Yeah, it's just a timing. So we'll pull that in, so that way there it closes those books out. But I think that it makes we really don't have the capacity in this year to reduce that, but we certainly do not want to increase it. I think we have the amount that we have right now. We should continue whittling that down. I think the council has taken a good policy approach with fund balance, so that if there's those one-time allocations from the fund balance, that should be done once you have the amount, or obviously if there was an emergency like we had with Maine Waste to Energy, you can go ahead and shift that. That's why it's there. But then really your decision-making should be when you receive the report back from the auditors, if we're over the 14% threshold, that's where you should take a look at that and say, okay, what do we do with that? But I'd rather see you do it there on one time than to allocate it here, because all that does is it creates a cliff that we may not have that revenue, that additional fund balance in a future year. So now we're forced to reduce that, right?
So two things, going back to state revenue share, I just wanted to make note for example, in fiscal year 24, we budgeted 5.975, and the state had projected almost 2 million more than that, and we ended up with 6.6. So that's why that projection is really important, to not take that as an actual number. I know it looks nice and we really would like to, but a lot of what goes into our fund balance actually comes from that state revenue share, and it is important that we continue to put money into that fund balance to stay within that 10 to 14%. Back to the fund balance discussion, it's in the current budget as revenue, as a carry forward, because we know this is such a difficult budget. However, I will say, we do not transfer fund balance in unless we're not meeting our fund balance contribution percentage at the end of the year. If for some reason we've overspent somewhere, or we didn't get expected revenues, that's when that fund balance contribution actually gets transferred in to that general fund or gets used. We did not use that. We did not overspend. We did not obtain under projected revenues in the last year, so 2025. So that was not transferred in or used. So while it is budgeted, it's very rarely actually transferred and used. That said, as the city manager said, it's preferred to not continue budgeting that revenue with your budget. We did include that again this year because we know it's such a difficult budget. There is a large jump in debt service. So there are some variables that we felt comfortable including it in this budget, but that note of not continuing to do so in the future is really important to keep in mind as we move forward.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, that's a great point regarding what, when, and why we bring it over. Councilor Platt.
Yeah, I have a question on the general government section here. It seems that most of, obviously there's a couple nuanced issues like homestead exemption. If it becomes an unfunded mandate from the state, that becomes an issue. But things like personal property reimbursement, excise tax of vehicles, some of our larger revenue items, seems like those will tick up over time. You know, personal property might go down, but then it goes up, and then it goes down, then it goes up.
So personal property, for example, only goes up if valuations go up. So if we're not having valuation increase, we can expect that to reduce.
Just depreciates and then we revalue.
Correct.
And then
It'll just
depreciates.
continue to.
My
yeah.
question is for, I guess specifically for state revenue sharing, only because I have a memory of the mayor or somebody saying that as we grow, that percentage share could go down. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I guess maybe
city manager mentioned that at
Yeah.
the prior budget workshop, that there is a potential for us to go above a threshold where we won't get that second portion of revenue share. We would still get an initial portion, but not that second portion. The city is still under that threshold at this time. That's just something we keep an eye on.
So my question, I guess, is just long-term. Of all these large revenue line items, what's the one or two that in a year or two or three or four or five might not be as robust as it is right now? I know on the school side, you know, those are some of the discussions you think about when you look at the funding line items. But are there any on here that we should be looking at as a future time bomb, or is that not how this is really looking?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor probably has some thoughts regarding homestead and some of those initiatives. I think we're locked in, regardless what happens with a change in administration. I think we're pretty locked in with certain. We talk about, and when we talk about legislation, we talk about protecting the core. Right? As municipal governments, statewide, we talk about protecting the core. Part of that is homestead reimbursement. Part of that is the state revenue share. That's those core items that we want to make sure that we're advocating that there's no legislative changes that are impacting that. So we are, that's what we advocate for. As far as threats, I think, Mayor, I don't know if you want to cover some of those, but.
I
Yeah,
also hope
so-
I didn't open up a can of worms. I don't want to
No,
get too
no,
far
it's-
off topic.
It's fine, but it's a really important topic to think about, right? So, the city manager's correct, right? As an example, at the Maine Mayor's Coalition, we spend a lot of time messaging to leadership of the House and the Senate, Appropriations Committee, and with the governor about the importance of some of these items. So, we're feeling very comfortable at this point in this current budget cycle where things are with revenue, general revenue sharing, where things are with school funding. It wasn't that long ago that revenue sharing was slashed, right? We had an administration that decided that the way to balance the budget was not to worry about changing the state portion of the budget, it was just reduce the revenue sharing. So I don't think that I don't think that there's a foreseeable event, given that what happened in the LePage administration and what the impact was for municipalities, that there's an appetite for this. But I don't think that people should just assume you're always going to get revenue sharing at the same rate. I think that the municipalities need to work hard to keep making that case about why it's important and why it helps alleviate property tax burden. Some of these other ones, we're always advocating for an increase in the GA reimbursement rate, the homestead reimbursement rate. A lot of these things that are split, I think it's unlikely to see any significant changes to those in the near term. I think the property tax task force that just brought their interim report in, and they're going to report next year, I think you could see some significant changes to how property tax is handled. I think the goal of that is to be revenue neutral, meaning that we may receive less property tax revenue, but we would be expecting revenue from the state to increase for broad-based taxes. So especially general purpose aid to education and general revenue sharing, I just have catastrophic effects on municipalities. So you have to advocate for this all the time.
We're constantly monitoring. Sometimes there's some really good initiatives that are being brought forward, but then when it comes to appropriations on how they're going to pay for that, that's when they're usually pulling from a revenue stream we already have. And so if they're now going to pull from that revenue stream or a county revenue stream, right now it's like, okay, now that's going to reduce, or it's going to increase what we have to pay county tax, or it's going to reduce what we're getting in some other line item. So those are those things that we're constantly chasing. I guess would be a good illustration on that, is that because it's to the 11th hour with the appropriations committee that you might see some kind of sweeping change, and you have to make sure that we're monitoring it. And that's why we are involved in coalitions that have people there, and they're constantly monitoring it for us as well.
Just a brief comment about the second part of general revenue sharing, which is called Rev 2. So Rev 1, is the bulk of it. It's driven off of the monthly numbers the state gets. Rev 2 is an appropriated bucket of money. It's fixed. How the pie is carved up is the issue. And it's a fairly complicated formula, but we've seen some abnormalities in the outcome over the last few years, mostly driven by communities that had really rapidly escalating property values at a greater rate than Auburn. So we've seen some significant increases in some past years here in Rev 2, where some other communities have dropped off. Some have zeroed out. They didn't even get any Rev 2 money. The Rev 2 money is really focused on the service centers. So I would expect that if we see any softening of Rev 2 money, it's because of the changes in the rate of property valuation growth in some of the cities south of here. So I would not expect that you're going to be seeing any. It's unlikely you'll see significant increases like we have in the past in Rev 2, because they're now getting a piece of the pie, right? And the pie is only so big. So I would expect over time that could be flat or diminished somewhat, but it doesn't have the impact of general revenue sharing.
Yeah, there's very few communities that have demographics like Auburn that we can even begin to compare with. So we have, if you think about how our tax base is really broken out, we're well balanced. And so when there are some of these major swings with market for some of these other communities, if that major swing is 80% of their tax base, they're going to see a larger impact on that than we would if we're very well distributed as far as the balance of our tax base. So some of those swings we don't see that impact like other communities do, which is a great thing. Auburn is very well balanced within our tax base. Not many communities can really build on that. And if you look at some of those other communities that their revenue share 2 dropped, some of those communities had oceanfront properties that had some pretty high impacts that we're not going to experience.
Councilor Cowell?
And when you say we're well balanced, you mean by the class of our properties?
Correct. Yeah, sorry. Yep.
I do have one other question. If the invested income, the money that's here, that's dividends, often base of.
Right, so that is a combination of both the interest we're receiving off of the funds that we have with our banking system, as well as actual invested in CDs. So we do have an investment portfolio, so that's a combination of those things.
Thanks.
And I've had a recent conversation with our investment portfolio rep about changing rates. It's a little bit of a moving target based on what's happening with the economy in the world. So we tried to be as conservative as we could while still also noting that we've seen an increase over the last several years, and we're getting some good interest rates at this time.
No changes really in the next few categories, so unless there's specific questions there, I'll jump down to under business and community development, where you see the general assistance, state reimbursement. If you recall, I talked about this as one of those drivers of why our expense line item decreased. Here's that offset. Your revenue also increased. So we increased by $115,000 as a result of we're anticipating that we will pay less out in general assistance. The state reimburses us at a 70% rate for actual costs that we pay out, not admin. So the actual costs that we pay out to recipients. So you're seeing that's the 70% of that expense line item that we reduced.
But it's a good negative number to see, right?
Yeah.
Every 70 cents that we aren't getting there, we're saving $1 in expense. So it's a 30-cent net benefit to the
That's
budget.
right. Yeah. Okay. And then if you jump down, you'll see a lot of our departments have small miscellaneous fees. Those have been incorporated to ensure if it's something beyond just general resident services that we provide, if it's added costs to different reports or funding that we're getting in, then you'll see it listed here. If you jump to fire and EMS, it's probably the next one. We did a small increase in EMS transport, And this is one, we'll talk probably more when we get to public safety, we talk about their budget. We can talk about the EMS side of the fire operation. There's a lot taking place with insurance companies on reimbursements in the state regarding Maine Care on reimbursement. And so this is a constant fight to make sure that we're collecting what we need to be collecting. I think Kelsey can probably, if there's somebody who wants further detail, we can make that available in the future, but talk about what we actually bill and what we receive. And then we also pull money that goes to the EMS capital as well, so that when you're paying for some of that EMS capital expenditures, you're going to see in the, when we talk about CIP, you'll see different funding sources. One of them is bond. The other one comes from our EMS reserve account that we've created to reserve some of those dollars so we're not bonding any of our EMS dollars.
So each quarter in your finance report, you get an EMS billing page that gives you a little update of where we're at with collecting those payments.
Any questions there? The other piece is the next category, which is police. We talked about at the last meeting about including the MDE agent, and you see that we've added that revenue line item for that expense. It's going to offset the expense. But you'll also see where we reduce two other line items. One of them is the transfer into the opioid, from the opioid settlement. We had been carrying that in there for quite some time. We're going to have a workshop where we just talk about the opioid funds that we currently have. How should those be distributed? Where are our priorities? So I pulled that out of this so that we can have a conversation about that, because we see that probably sitting best in just a revenue line item, that as you approve items, it'll go into that revenue line item as an expense, and as new dollars come in, and you'll be able to get a report on where we currently sit with our opioid funds. But that's why you see that $60,000 removed. Even though you had been budgeting revenue coming in, transfer in from opioids, we had never had any expenses. And I think this is a third year of putting it, or there was at least 3 years of putting in there, because there was a grant through Hannaford that offset that cost for us. We're still 44 weeks, somewhere like that, left to expend in that grant. And so we've got that time to really have a larger conversation regarding the opioid funds and how would you like to distribute those. And so we'll do that at a future workshop. I believe we're going to look at April for that, for you to be able to have that conversation. And then the last one is regarding fines for parking violations. This is one where parking's been, there's parking that's in a special revenue account, because we collect parking permit fees. But then there's also expenditures that the way that revenue account was set up is that the maintenance of that parking garage that we have never hits into any of your expense, because that was developed and designed and set up to be offset by revenues that come in through the permitting. And so we've started moving some of our expenses regarding parking into that same revenue account. It just makes sense to move this into that. So now what you'll start seeing is a parking special revenue account report. And you'll be able to see all transactions in and out of that, and just puts them all in one place for you.
And remind me, we moved this is sort of a follow-on from last year. My recollection is last year's budget, we moved the parking officer into that special revenue account out of the police department. Is that correct?
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yes.
we did. Yeah. And so now this is taking the revenue with it. Because that's that balance, where if you just said, look, we don't want to do, we don't want the enforcement piece, we'll just have the parking permits. Without the enforcement arm, people aren't not going to buy permits. You need to have that balance. And so there's a cost to that, and that's built into the enforcement program.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, good. No, that's it. for that.
Questions from the council? Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This isn't so much a question about what we've just heard, but I've had several constituents ask if we have officers out on the road to try to catch those that are going well above the speed limit. Certain roads in Auburn make it very easy for them to take, for some drivers to take off like they're flying a plane, where the wheels hardly touch the ground.
I do have and I think I just mentioned it to Councilor Cowan when we met earlier today, I do have a report that's been due to you. I have it already, I just haven't forwarded it to you. I will do that. It's the traffic enforcement plan and then their quarterly report. I'll get that to you. We do have officers that are out there. I think there's always that. Part of the, I think I had shared, part of the Maine drug enforcement shift was that our PACE officer to be focused more on some of our traffic initiatives and work there. But then there's always that balance of call volume and availability and I think, the mayor and I have had a lot of conversations regarding changing culture, right? What is that culture within the PD as far as enforcement and what we do regarding that. But the report will give you a good summary of traffic stops, tickets written, and types of violations as well. So.
Are we still having officers out by the schools during the time that kids get dropped off and stuff?
We do, yeah. Fairview has been one of the real target areas for the recently. But yes, I'd say we do that during certain peak times when they are available. I think that's the other piece. If they're on it's unfortunately, school starts at the same time that we have our spike in call volume because of its commuter hours. That's when we're going to have most of our crashes. That's when we're going to have other calls for service. And so sometimes that pulls away. But when they are available or any special details they work in to make sure that they're hitting that. As a reminder, especially for new counselors coming in, municipalities receive $0 on those fines that are issued. That goes to the state. So there's no, for every ticket we issue, we don't receive a portion of that back. What the state does provide for us are grant opportunities. And so we're very aggressive in our grant opportunities to be able to provide distracted driving or OUI grants, speed grants. And so we'll apply for those. And when we do that, the officer that's working that detail, that's their priority. That's what they need to be doing. They need to be demonstrating that they are making those stops. We report back to the state on how many and what that looks like. The challenge is that you could have an officer out doing a detail and doing a speed detail, and their first stop is an OUI. That's it. That officer is now consumed with probably a 2-hour processing of an OUI, and it really takes away from that grant opportunity. But so that's just some of what we have to work through when that happens. But I would say, just as a reminder, that there's no revenue line item anywhere regarding the amount of citations that we write.
Other questions from the council? Any further discussion by the council at this point? If not, Mr. Manager, do you want to talk about the forward-looking schedule, and I'll make a few comments about how we'll approach the next few work sessions.
Thanks. So just as a reminder, so we're scheduled, and I definitely have items for you for each Monday in March. I think we've left the last Monday in March as tentative, but I think we'll probably end up using that time. And so if you can just continue planning on each March, I think just looking at what we have for you moving forward is that tomorrow night I will be, in accordance with the charter, I need to present the CIP plan to the planning board and receive feedback from the planning board regarding the CIP. So I'll be doing that tomorrow night, and so on the 16th, in the council budget workshop period before the meeting, we'll talk about the 5-year CIP, and then we'll also talk about public safety, and that as time allows. There's, again, like the mayor mentioned at the last meeting, some of our agendas, because we know we have a lot to do with budget. We'll look to build in time if we need to after the council meeting to finish up any of our budget workshop items. But that'll be a goal at the next meeting on the 23rd, and I'll send you a full schedule for you. But on the 23rd, I'll kind of give you an overview of where we are with Public Works, and then general government. We'll talk about all the general government line items, and then the intergovernmental programs, and I'll have those reps. I'll email those reps and ask them to be here or provide you a report. We've already got a report from them, but if they want to be here in person, that's their opportunity to come in and answer any questions you have on the intergovernmental components. By charter, getting the CIP plan to you is prior to March 30th. And so I'm already hitting that by providing that to you on the 16th. I'm getting that to you. And then, like I said, we'll have a tentative budget workshop at that date. And really, I'm leaving that open for as items come up that you might need for a follow-up or just general discussion of budget, where we're at, where we're heading. That'll be a time for you at that meeting. The school budget presentation will be on April 6th. That's when the school will come in and talk about the work that they've done. And then I'll provide you the actual final city manager's report. And again, that's to ensure that I'm hitting that before the charter deadline, which is April 30th. I'm getting that to you in advance, as well as that will be when you adopt the CIP plan. And again, it's the plan. It's the items that we've identified that are maintenance, projects coming forward, all those things. That's built into that plan. You'll have that well in advance. You'll have time to talk about that, and we'll make any adjustments that we need to in the plan. And then the April 20th workshop, we'll talk about the actual CIP for FY27 and what does that look like. And we might actually be able to work that in an earlier meeting based on where we're at for time and the schedule. But I want to at least make sure we're listing it so we know at least by this date we will have talked about that item and discussed it, and you'll have a conversation about what's that bond number you're looking at, what do you want to ensure that we're covering. You'll have my recommendation. I'll put that in there where I see as priorities, but ultimately you'll need to make that priority list, and then that leads us to adopting the school budget on May 4th. And our reason for hitting that is that there are some requirements as far as getting that adopted by the council, getting that available to the public, so that so at their the June 9th budget school referendum, all that is done, and we're in that timeline to be able to make that referendum available to the public. So, and then as the mayor said, you have all the way till June 30th to work through the budget. We'll build out the schedule as we need to, but that's the timeline that we have right now. Often the work is done by that May 4th. Often in the last couple of years, we've been able to complete that work by May 4th. And then, and so we've had the council's public hearing and first reading of the budget at that May 4th date, if we're there. If we're not there, then we'll push that out. Yep. Go ahead.
Sometime in the next week or two, we'll have some budget books available. So if you've been on the council in the past, you're familiar with this, but any documents that we're giving at workshops are going to be part of those binders. So don't worry about having all this loose paper kind of hanging around. Everything that we've provided and will be providing to you will be included in those binders. So if you bring those binders with you to each workshop, when we have new documents, you can either leave them for me to place where they need to go in that binder, or I can just hand them to you and you can put them in where you'd like. But that'll be in the next week or so that you have those binders to be able to just have everything in one place and be able to follow along and be able to look back at things that we've discussed before.
A couple other scheduling items. So there'll be public forums regarding the budget. The first one is tomorrow night, the 10th. 6 to 8 p.m. across the hall here in the community room. and on Saturday, the 14th, 3 to 5 p.m. at the Resource Center on Mill Street. This is an opportunity for members of the public to come in, ask questions about how the budget works, share their thoughts and concerns about the budget, what they see as priorities. It's a more conversational approach than what you can get through the public hearing. So again, tomorrow night, 6 to 8 here in the community room, and Saturday, the 14th, 3 to 5 at the Resource Center.
Can I just add one thing to that, Mayor?
Sure.
So those are the mayor puts that form on, which is, he's gotten great feedback, encouraged councils to attend. Staff, we're not part of that, only because it can really distract the conversation. If staff's there, it's like, well, let me try to answer that question, and that's really needs to be here at this setting. And so the mayor collects that, and a lot of times some of you will also get that, but then the mayor says, hey, here's some questions that might have been asked, and we'll get those answers. But we're not at that table, only because it can distract the public forum. We want people to come in and talk to you about, you know, their concerns regarding the budget or their support of the budget, things that they're seeing. So that's just a little snapshot of why that's set up the way that it is.
Great, thank you. I think the other thing I would want to mention tonight is some expectation setting for the council around how these workshops are going to unfold. You know, as the manager has presented, there's going to be parts of this budget that the council really has no means to control. You have to pay a debt service. The county tax is what it is. You have to pay, you know, we talked about solid waste tonight. Some of these things aren't in the control of the council. A lot of the budget, when we get into talking about the programs and services provided through departments, is where the council will have to be thinking about how they want to prioritize the delivery of programs and services. As you saw when the manager talked about budget drivers, you know, on the city side, we're at a 13.6% increase in the budget, right? So there's going to be some discussion about this. I've asked the manager, as we have the workshops regarding departments, to take the difference between his proposed budget and the 7.5% target that we set in dollars, and apportion that by percentage of the budget equitably across the departments. Not to say that the manager's recommending that that's the cut, but I think that will help people understand when we get to a department and we say, okay, you know, I'll just make up a number for illustrative purposes. The department request from the manager was $1 million. If we have to close this gap to 7.5, you got to cut $180,000 out of this. And just in general terms, what that would look like. It's not going to be specific because there's a lot of staff work that goes into this if you start prioritizing things and identifying cuts. I think that'll just help people understand the nature of the impact on the department, and it be a good starting point for the conversation. Again, it's not, the manager's not going to be saying, I'm recommending that cut. He's provided his recommended budget, but it just helps you frame up the discussion. So any questions on the forward-looking schedule and the work sessions that are coming up? Council Walker.
Yeah, I would like to ask that we have the people that run the solid waste come in with their budget, show us why that they need $1 million. We're talking $506,650 from just the city of Auburn. There's 11 other towns, or 10 for sure, that are paying the other half of this amount of money. And that's a lot of money, no matter how we look at it, for this city to have to throw into that budget, not seeing why we're almost doubling our budget. So I think what they need to come in and explain to the taxpayer of Auburn and this council of why we're going up to an $88 increase, for instance, for a budget that has had problems for the past 3-4 years, that has come to the point where we've spent somewhere around $3.5 million, and we're trying to make up $1 million in 1 year. On top of what we've already given that facility, which you just wrote a check for around $600,000. The other towns wrote enough to make $1 million up, whatever it may have been. I feel that they owe us at least where they're going with this money and what that money is going to really do.
So just to be clear for the public, so the Council Walker, where the 623,000, I think it was, that we funded at an undesignated fund balance, was basically to cover an operating deficit in this fiscal year. So I think when they come in, these are very good questions the councilors raised. When they come in, the focus will be on the FY27 budget, which has the board adopted the FY27 budget? They have. So I think if they come in with the FY27 budget and explain it, really the point is, if in FY26 they had a budget for which they had an operating deficit that required the member towns to catch that up, what's taking place, not just for the fees that Auburn's going to have to pay, but what's the revenue and expense situation in that budget overall, to show us what's driving the tipping fee increases and why that's necessary to be able to operate for the year without Auburn having to fund 62% of whatever an operating deficit might be, so that this doesn't occur again in the next year. So,
Yeah, the only thing I think I would say is, so I'm the municipal rep on the board. I'm not sure, Counselor, who we would bring in. I mean, I think I could bring their executive director in, but this is the history, and I think we'll get right into it. They have been under budgeting almost $2 million for the last 2 years. So when we talk about where is this money going, it's because it's been going out to major maintenance costs, and they had not been anticipating what some of those costs would be. And so that's why it was such a drastic shift, because if not, you're going to see, if we didn't start making these changes, and these changes, even though you cannot balance the deficit of Maine Waste to Energy on the member municipalities. We just can't make up that cost, right? But I think that we needed to increase it. We've been paying $54 a ton, or just this last year. We've been in the 40s for a long time. $54 a ton last year. If you look at a comparison, which would be Eco Maine, their member fees are somewhere around 105, I think, 110. That's their member fees. And so we've been really under that for quite some time. And we've had I think Councilor Walker's been on this board for a long time. We've had a great reserve, that cash reserve at Maine Waste to Energy. It wasn't until the last 3 years that these major maintenance issues started impacting and really plaguing the plan. And so, as I said, when I voted on the FY27 budget, I'm not 100% certain that's the budget that's going to carry the end of the day, because I'm not. We're putting guesses. They have not fixed the problem yet, and they're still working through it. They've got people coming in, looking at the boiler, trying to determine what some of the issues are. There's one boiler with some of the most recent changes. It's operational and it's being effective. Fingers are crossed that was the solution moving forward. The other boiler's down. They're working through that and they're trying to figure that out. But I still think we're going to be somewhere around $500,000 short, just on the projections that we're seeing. And so, but we needed a starting point with the FY27 budget. I think we made the best conservative effort based on revenues that we have. Any other revenue that comes in has to come from its members through an assessment. There's no other way to make that work. You can't go and say, You know, I mentioned earlier, we were able to move the commercial to 133. As Council Walker will tell you, you're at market. You can't, actually, we're a little higher than market, but we're banking on the fact that, you know what, if you had to go somewhere else, it's going to cost you more to drive that somewhere else. So we believe we're in that sweet spot of some of our tipping fees. But then you just can't come up with a plan now that's going to outpace what the market will pay you for that, because then you're not going to be bringing in the waste. And if you're not bringing in the waste, then the plant's not operating at its efficiency. And so I'm not sure how much more. I can walk through this budget with you. I probably have spent the last month hours in this budget. I can walk through this budget, tell you all the changes you're going to see in the budget are all the recommendations I made. 100% of it. We are the deciding vote on that budget. So I made the recommendations. If people weren't going to go for it, then I could easily put the veto vote in, and that budget's not going to go forward. That's how the system was set up, and we leveraged it that way. Right or wrong, we took the initiative to say, you are not utilities. Good example. Council Walker will tell you when that boiler goes down and you've got to turn it back up and get it going again, your utility cost for natural gas skyrockets to get that heating element back to where it needs to be. It costs a lot of money. Well, it's showing that we're shutting down that one of those boilers pretty consistently over the last 4 months. Well, then you need to put more money in your utility costs. You couldn't carry the same amount because we haven't hit that amount in 3 years. And so don't carry that amount. Increase that amount so that we know that we're at least looking at our scheduled shutdowns. As Council Walker would know, the scheduled shutdowns, at least you're covering those costs and some emergency shutdowns that might happen. And so those are just a few of those line items, but I mean, we can walk through it. I have no problem inviting the executive director here. He can talk about why some of these issues have happened and challenges, and we'll share the budget. It was just approved on Wednesday, so I think it was Wednesday. We had a board meeting, and that's where it was approved at. We also approved the revised FY26 budget. I think the meeting prior to that allowed for the assessment to take place, and I think you'll see it's a pretty conservative budget, but trying to take into account that we had been budgeting, a little less than around 2 million, a little less than 2 million in major maintenance, but spending over 3 million. And so we made that one of the changes that I made was increase that major maintenance line item to that $3 million mark, because that's ultimately what we'll be spending. And then the great thing would be if we're not, great. Let's bring that back and put that money back into building the reserve account. So really, I understand Councilor Walker's point is that you would hope that tipping fee, like we were talking about ice rental fees, right? That would slowly, gradually increase, but it just, the cost to run the plant exceeded where we were. When I worked through the numbers, we're operating that plant at it's costing about $125 a ton cost to run that plant. Well, the majority of what we're bringing in is not collecting $125 a ton. So you're not making that up. And so it's getting all the users closer to that amount, and really getting our costs closer to the cost. We could, as members, we could be paying $54 a ton, but if the plant's not operating to full efficiency and we're hauling now at somewhere's, greater than 80, I think it's 85 or somewhere's in there, a ton to haul that to the landfill. Well, we at least need to cover our costs. So that's how that was built in. There's some other things that are happening now that either myself or the executive director will be able to report on the changes that we're making regarding other contracts. And so we're moving forward with non-member contracts covering this impact that we've had within the plan as well. So just a brief summary. I can certainly have them come in and review the budget with you, but that's what we're faced with.
Councilor Cowell?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reemphasize, I appreciate the efforts that you all are making to try to get closer to real costs so that it's not the members that are having to pay the extra dollars, right? So it's an abrupt increase in our fees right now, but it is to try to avoid what just happened where we had to pay and a fewer number of people were paying for that. So I think we really, I'm not going to ask you to calculate this, but if we added the 600,000 into what we had, add that into our tipping fee, it was more than 54 last year, right? Realistically. And the second thing, Phil, you've mentioned in the past that there's plans to do an assessment of the plant. Is that part of this coming up?
Yeah, so we're having conversations about when the next scheduled shutdown of the plant, to have a company come in and take a look at getting a good assessment for us on what are the issues, and then also what are the potential major maintenance issues moving forward, so we have a good understanding of that. I think our plant operation people, the manager for that, I think he's spot on. He's working through a lot of that, and I think with him and then having an assessment of individuals that run plants like this, to also have another set of eyes take a look at this, will give us a good idea of where we're going. I think the important piece, and this is, Councilor Walker certainly knows this, I think an important piece is that if you go back to the mid-'80s when the city took a bond out for this plant, there was that repayment that took place, and then we've had several years since that bond's been paid off that we've been experiencing really a cost for our solid waste that no other communities other than our member communities have experienced. There's a lot of value that are cost savings that took place over that span of years that the plant was operating well, efficient. We were only spending somewhere between $30 and $40 a ton for many years. That was money in the bank that we weren't spending out, that other municipalities were paying those higher costs. We hadn't had to pay that. Well, now we're paying. We're back to, we've got these major maintenance issues, and now we're paying. And so I had this conversation with one of the other member municipalities just to say, I really would encourage a member municipality not to jump ship on this. This is, you've had years of good savings. We need to right this, get the plant where it's operational, and then even moving forward, if you go and try to be a non-member somewhere, your costs for your tipping fees will be increased. And so, and you think about what that is over the long term. So I think if we were to run this out over even a 20-year period from when we've paid that bond off to now, you're going to see the city has had significant savings as a result of those early investments back in the 80s, paid off for 20 years. And but now we're in this, we got to get the plant back to good operating efficiency.
Any other questions from the council? So that concludes the workshop session. We have an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405, Sub 6A, for discussion of a personnel matter. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilor Platt, seconded by Councilor Cowan. All those in favor? Council will be in executive session.